Welcome. I'm so glad you're here. Tonight, I invite you to lie back, close your eyes, and rest. Not from learning, but into it. Because some of the most powerful things we ever learn come in stillness. This is a story about rulers, about people who sat on thrones, but carried far more than crowns. They were feared, admired, misunderstood, and sometimes deeply loved. Before we begin, if this quiet journey speaks to you, please consider subscribing to the channel, liking this video, and gently tapping the notification bell. It helps this small space grow so we can keep creating calm, thoughtful stories just like this one for your nights, your breath, and your curiosity. Now, take a slow, full breath. Let your shoulders soften. Let the noise of the day fall away like dust from old stone. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to prove or achieve or solve. This is not a test. It's a remembering of the people who shaped history, not just through orders or armies, but through vision, contradiction, and something deeper than power. In the pages of time, some ruled with fire, some with silence, some with grace, and some with fear. But all of them left something behind, a trace, a question, a pulse that still lives in our own ideas about leadership, strength, and legacy. Tonight, I'll walk you through 5 lives, 5 rulers from different corners of the world whose stories still echo today. This is not a lesson in dates and battles. It's a soft exploration of what it means to hold power and still be human. So let your thoughts slow. Let your body grow heavier. And as you listen, may your mind open gently to a past that shaped the world you now sleep in. You are safe here. You are welcome. And the story is just beginning. Now that we're here, let us begin at the heart of this journey. Before names, before thrones, before history carved statues and wrote laws, there was a question, a quiet, ancient tension. Why do some people rise above others, and what happens to them when they do? Power can protect, it can build, but it can also destroy the one who holds it. Let's begin there, not with war, not with rule, but with the strange, heavy contradiction at the center of every crown. Why some rulers are feared and still deeply admired. Power is one of the oldest forces in human history. It shapes kingdoms, rewrites borders, and echoes across time. and yet it is also one of the most fragile things a person can hold. Many rulers are remembered not for their armies, but for how they carried the weight of command. Some led through terror, others through grace. But the strongest left something behind, not just obedience, but memory. True power is a paradox. To rule, one must stand above, and yet remain close enough to be followed. To lead, one must make decisions alone, yet represent the many. To be feared may bring control, but to be loved brings legacy. The rulers you'll hear about tonight lived in that paradox. Some walked through it with wisdom, others with fire. But all of them remind us that leadership is never just strength. It's also doubt, silence, sacrifice, and vision. Let's walk gently into their stories. We've spoken about the paradox, about how power both uplifts and isolates. But now, let us go deeper. Let us ask something that history has whispered for centuries. What makes a ruler truly great? Not just in battle, not just by law, but in the quiet judgment of time. When the armies are gone, when the palaces have faded, what remains? Let's explore. A soft exploration of vision, legacy, and the invisible weight of leadership. Greatness is a word we use often, but rarely pause to understand. We speak of great rulers, great empires, great victories. But what is greatness truly? Is it size, wealth, conquest? Or is it something quieter, harder to measure, but easier to feel? History teaches us that greatness is not always loud. It is not always carved in stone or gilded in gold. Sometimes, greatness is found in the way a leader listens, in the way they rise, not above people, but beside them. A great ruler holds more than power. They hold responsibility. They carry the invisible weight of decisions that affect millions. And they carry it every day, even when no one is watching, even when the crowd has stopped cheering. A great ruler is not only obeyed, they are remembered, not just for what they built, but for what they stood for the ideas they protected, the fears they calmed, the future they imagined. Many ruled through fear, few ruled through love. But the ones we return to, in books, in art, in memory, are the ones who knew how to balance both. A great ruler doesn't chase immortality. They plant it in laws, in learning, in people. They know they will not live forever, but they act as if their choices might, and often they do. They may wear a crown, but their true authority is quieter. It's in the way their people spoke of them years later, centuries later, softly, with respect, with awe, with a kind of love that only time can uncover. Greatness is not perfection. Even the wisest rulers make mistakes. But greatness is found in what they do next, in how they listen, change, and rise again. Not above their people, but with them. So when we ask, what makes a ruler great? We're not asking about control. We're asking about character, about courage, about vision, about the quiet fire that burns in those who lead, not because they want to be seen, but because they want to serve. And now, with that question held gently in our hands, we can meet the rulers who lived that greatness, each in their own way. We've spoken of power, and we've asked what makes it great. Now let's meet someone who answered that question, not with words, but with a lifetime. A woman born into a world that told her who she could be, and who quietly, steadily became more. Not just a ruler, not just a name in history books, but a mind, vast, sharp, curious, that reshaped an empire from within. This is the story of Catherine, the Empress of Ideas. She was not born Russian. She was not born royal. And she was not supposed to change history. But she did. Catherine the Great, or Catherine II, began her life in a small German principality. She was born in the year 1729 with a different name, a different language, and no crown on her head. She arrived in Russia as a teenager, brought to marry a man she did not choose, in a court she did not yet understand. But she listened, she learned, and she waited. Her husband, Peter III, was cold, unstable, and unready to rule. But Catherine watched, and quietly she built something he did not: trust. With the nobles, with the army, with the people. When Peter took the throne, his reign lasted only a few months. He was overthrown, and days later, he was dead. Catherine became Empress of Russia in the year 1762. And that is where her real story begins. She could have ruled like many before her, with distance, with ceremony, with fear. But Catherine chose something else. She chose to rule through thought. She read constantly philosophy, science, politics, law. She wrote letters to the greatest minds of her time: Voltaire, Diderot, Montesquieu. She didn't just admire Enlightenment ideas. She invited them in. Catherine believed that power should be guided by knowledge, that an empire could be strong and still be thoughtful. Under her reign, Russia expanded its borders, but also its schools, its libraries, its sense of self. She reformed government, modernized the legal code, improved medicine and public health. She founded the Smolny Institute, the first state school for girls in Russia. She built hospitals, encouraged vaccination, commissioned art and literature, and turned St. Petersburg into a center of learning. But her rule was not perfect. She upheld serfdom, a deep contradiction to her ideals. She faced rebellions, conspiracies, and criticism. And yet, through it all, she remained curious, open, bold. Catherine understood something rare. That power is not only about control, it is about conversation. She was both feared and admired, firm and intelligent, a ruler who, in a world of kings, proved that a woman could not only hold power, but shape it. When she died in the year 1796, she left behind more than an empire. She left behind a direction, a movement forward, a sense that ideas matter, that knowledge is strength, and that greatness is not something you inherit, but something you grow, page by page, choice by choice, day by day. Catherine was not just a monarch, she was a mirror, reflecting what leadership could be when paired with vision. And to this day, her echo remains in schools, in books, in the quiet minds of those who still believe that ruling begins with thinking. Not all greatness begins in books. Some begins in blood, in conquest, in the roar of armies and the silence after. Let us now turn from Catherine's palace to something older, warmer, more ancient. Stone roads under sandals, prayer carved into stone, a man whose rule began with war, but whose true legacy was peace. This is Ashoka, the emperor who listened to silence and changed the meaning of power. The Maurya Empire once stretched across most of the Indian subcontinent, and at its height, it was ruled by a single man, Ashoka. He was not the first emperor, nor was he gentle in his rise. Born in the 3rd century before our era, Ashoka came to power through bloodlines, politics, and eventually civil war. He was known to be ruthless in his early years, ambitious, sharp, and determined. He crushed rebellions, expanded his reach, and in the 8th year of his reign, he waged one of the most brutal campaigns in ancient history, the conquest of Kalinga. That war changed everything. Kalinga was a proud and independent region, but Ashoka wanted it under imperial rule. The battle was won, but at a devastating cost. Historical records say that over 100,000 people died. Tens of thousands more were displaced. And when Ashoka walked through the ruins, he did not feel triumph. He felt grief. Real, heavy, haunting grief. It is said that in the aftermath, he stood not as a victor, but as a man undone. That moment became a turning point, a breath in history, a silence that echoed louder than swords. Ashoka began to change. He turned inward. He studied the teachings of the Buddha. He embraced Dharma, the principle of moral order, compassion, and truth. And then he transformed his rule. He did not step down. He did not become a monk, but he ruled differently. He began carving edicts into stone, not of conquest, but of kindness, of tolerance, of care for animals, of respect for all beliefs. These inscriptions, known as the Edicts of Ashoka, still stand today, etched into stone pillars, caves, and walls across India, Nepal, and Pakistan. He built hospitals, planted trees, ordered wells to be dug along roads for travelers, and preached the values of nonviolence, humility, and ethical governance. He sent ambassadors, not with swords, but with messages of peace. He did not erase his past. He acknowledged it, and then built something better on its ashes. This is what made Ashoka great. Not that he ruled, but that he changed, that he listened, that he chose reflection over pride, that he allowed pain to teach him, and let wisdom guide what power once drove. When he died, likely around the year 232 before our era, he left behind one of the earliest examples in history of moral leadership at the scale of empire. Ashoka was feared once, but he is remembered now with reverence, not for the wars he won, but for the peace he chose. His story reminds us that greatness is not found in perfection, but in transformation. That a ruler's true power may lie not in how they begin, but in how they become. We've seen power transformed into wisdom. Now let us look at power in motion, restless, brilliant, burning. Not all rulers settle. Some are driven by vision too vast for walls. Some carry entire empires not on thrones, but on their feet. Let us walk beside one of them now, a man who conquered the world and never stopped searching for more. This is the story of Alexander, the boy who became a legend, and the legend who became a question. He was born in the year 356 before our era, in the kingdom of Macedon, to a king named Philip and a mother named Olympias. His world, from the beginning, was one of ambition, of stories, maps, and dreams too large for borders. He studied with Aristotle, read Homer like scripture, and from childhood was told he was descended from Achilles, a hero born for glory, but not for peace. When his father was assassinated, Alexander was only 20 years old, and suddenly the crown was his. Not just Macedon, but a dream of something more. He wasted no time. Within 2 years, he had quelled revolts and united the Greek city-states. Within 5 years, he began one of the most legendary military campaigns in human history. His goal: to conquer the Persian Empire, to unite East and West, to go beyond what had ever been imagined. And he did. From the shores of the Aegean to the deserts of Egypt, from the mountains of Persia to the rivers of India, he marched, he fought, he won. His army followed him across continents, thousands of miles, year after year. And along the way, Alexander did not only conquer, he built. He founded cities, over 20, all bearing his name. He encouraged cultural exchange, married a woman from Bactria, adopted Persian dress and customs, and tried, in his own way, to create a new world. But empires are heavy things, and so are dreams. By the time Alexander reached India, his army was exhausted. They had followed him for nearly a decade. They had left home, families, lives behind, and at the edge of the world, they stopped. They refused to go farther, and Alexander wept. He had never been defeated by an enemy, but now he was stopped by the limits of loyalty, of body, of being human. He turned back, and not long after, in the year 323 before our era, he died suddenly in Babylon. He was only 32. To this day, historians still debate how he died. Poison? Fever? Exhaustion? But the truth may be simpler. He burned too brightly, for too long. Alexander is remembered as great. But what does that mean? He built one of the largest empires the world had ever seen. And yet, it did not last. It fractured. It splintered. And within a generation, it was gone. But the impact remained. The cities he founded became centers of learning. The cultures he connected changed the shape of trade, language, and art. He sparked a fusion of East and West that echoed for centuries. Alexander's greatness was not in what he ruled. It was in what he reached for, in his restlessness, his refusal to accept borders, his belief that the world could be more. He was feared by kings, followed by thousands, and loved, perhaps, only by history. He reminds us that greatness is not always peaceful. It is not always kind. Sometimes it is fire. Sometimes it is too much. But still, we remember him, because some legacies are not built to last. They are built to be felt, like a storm, like a dream, like a footprint still pressed into the dust of distant roads. We've seen power transformed into wisdom. Now let us look at power in motion, restless, brilliant, burning. Not all rulers settle. Some are driven by vision too vast for walls. Some carry entire empires not on thrones, but on their feet. Let us walk beside one of them now, a man who conquered the world and never stopped searching for more. This is the story of Alexander, the boy who became a legend, and the legend who became a question. He was born in the year 356 before our era, in the kingdom of Macedon, to a king named Philip and a mother named Olympias. His world, from the beginning, was one of ambition, of stories, maps, and dreams too large for borders. He studied with Aristotle, read Homer like scripture, and from childhood was told he was descended from Achilles, a hero born for glory, but not for peace. When his father was assassinated, Alexander was only 20 years old, and suddenly the crown was his. Not just Macedon, but a dream of something more. He wasted no time. Within 2 years, he had quelled revolts and united the Greek city-states. Within 5 years, he began one of the most legendary military campaigns in human history. His goal: to conquer the Persian Empire, to unite East and West, to go beyond what had ever been imagined. And he did. From the shores of the Aegean to the deserts of Egypt, from the mountains of Persia to the rivers of India, he marched, he fought, he won. His army followed him across continents, thousands of miles, year after year. And along the way, Alexander did not only conquer, he built. He founded cities, over 20, all bearing his name. He encouraged cultural exchange, married a woman from Bactria, adopted Persian dress and customs, and tried, in his own way, to create a new world. But empires are heavy things, and so are dreams. By the time Alexander reached India, his army was exhausted. They had followed him for nearly a decade. They had left home, families, lives behind, and at the edge of the world, they stopped. They refused to go farther, and Alexander wept. He had never been defeated by an enemy, but now he was stopped by the limits of loyalty, of body, of being human. He turned back, and not long after, in the year 323 before our era, he died suddenly in Babylon. He was only 32. To this day, historians still debate how he died. Poison, fever, exhaustion. But the truth may be simpler. He burned too brightly, for too long. Alexander is remembered as great. But what does that mean? He built one of the largest empires the world had ever seen. And yet, it did not last. It fractured. It splintered. And within a generation, it was gone. But the impact remained. The cities he founded became centers of learning. The cultures he connected changed the shape of trade, language, and art. He sparked a fusion of East and West that echoed for centuries. Alexander's greatness was not in what he ruled. It was in what he reached for, in his restlessness, his refusal to accept borders, his belief that the world could be more. He was feared by kings, followed by thousands, and loved, perhaps, only by history. He reminds us that greatness is not always peaceful. It is not always kind. Sometimes it is fire. Sometimes it is too much. But still, we remember him, because some legacies are not built to last. They are built to be felt, like a storm, like a dream, like a footprint still pressed into the dust of distant roads. Some leaders rise in silence, some rise in storms. The next name is one you know, but tonight we will walk through his story slowly, not to judge, but to understand. Not just the victories, not just the downfall, but the structure he left behind. Because sometimes the most powerful legacies come from the very ones who lost everything. Let's enter the story of Napoleon. He conquered Europe and built ideas that outlived him. He was born on the island of Corsica in the year 1769. Not into royalty, not into wealth, but into the chaos of revolution and the hunger for change. From the beginning, Napoleon Bonaparte stood out. He was brilliant, sharp-tongued, obsessed with order, discipline, and possibility. As a young man, he rose quickly through the military ranks during the French Revolution. By his mid-20s, he was already a general. By his early 30s, emperor. He came to power not by birthright, but by force, and by something more dangerous: vision. Napoleon saw not just France, but all of Europe as something that could be remade, more rational, more unified, more Napoleonic. He fought battles that became legend: Austerlitz, Jena, Wagram. For over a decade, he dominated the continent, redrawing borders, toppling monarchies, building a new world order with every march. But what made Napoleon truly powerful was not just his military mind. It was his ability to create. He reformed the legal system, creating what became known as the Napoleonic Code, a set of laws that valued clarity, property rights, equality before the law for men, and the authority of the state. This code still forms the basis of legal systems in dozens of countries today. He modernized education, built infrastructure, centralized administration. He turned chaos into shape, even as he caused more of it abroad. But power, once gained, must be carried, and it is heavier than it seems. As his empire grew, so did the resistance. Spain bled. Russia froze his army. England waited. And in the end, he fell. He was exiled, returned, and exiled again, this time to the island of St. Helena, where he lived his final years in isolation. He died in the year 1821, a prisoner, a shadow of the force he once was. But even in defeat, his legacy spread. He changed Europe, not just in maps, but in minds. To some, he was a tyrant. To others, a genius. To all, a storm. But storms are not only destruction. They clear paths. They reshape ground. And after them, structure is rebuilt. Napoleon reminds us that power can be explosive, but also architectural, that even those who fall may leave behind ideas that stand. He was feared, he was loved, and he was never forgotten. Because some rulers carved their names into stone, others into law, and a few into the weather itself. We've walked through palaces, through battlefields, poetry halls, and marble courts. We've seen power in its many forms, burning, building, bending. But now, let's pause. Let's sit inside the silence that surrounded them all. Because even the strongest rulers, the most brilliant, the most beloved, stood at times completely alone. This is not a story of action. It is a moment of stillness, a window into the loneliness that often waits behind the throne. Why leadership often means being alone, even in crowds. To lead is to stand apart, not above, but slightly removed. Not because of pride, but because of weight. Responsibility is not something that can always be shared. The higher one rises, the quieter the air becomes. Fewer voices reach you. Fewer people speak without caution. And fewer still truly see you. History shows us that many rulers lived surrounded by people, but known by none. Letters from queens, kings, emperors often speak not of glory, but of distance, of sleepless nights, of decisions no one else could make. Because to hold power is also to carry fear. Not only the fear of enemies, but of failing your people, of losing their trust, of being wrong in a way that affects millions. Catherine the Great had rooms full of advisors, and yet, in her writings, she confessed to doubt, to weariness, to walking corridors alone at night. Ashoka stood at the head of an empire and still found only silence in the aftermath of war. Alexander, surrounded by soldiers and servants, died with no one truly close enough to know what he feared most. Even Napoleon, whose every word was studied, ended his life in a cold, distant place. His thoughts, his only company. The throne looks heavy because it is. You do not sit on it freely. You do not rest there. You carry it. And sometimes it carries you away from yourself. Leadership isolates, not out of arrogance, but because true power comes with limits. You cannot always ask. You cannot always confess. You cannot always stop. There is also something else. Expectation. The world projects onto its rulers everything it wants: justice, order, protection, inspiration. And sometimes a ruler looks in the mirror and sees not a person, but a symbol, a statue in motion, a mask that no longer comes off. That is the loneliness of the throne. To be needed, but not known. To be praised, but rarely asked how you are. To be powerful and painfully human beneath it all. And yet, Many endured. Many ruled with compassion, even through silence. Many gave more than they had to give, because they understood that the crown is not just gold, it is made of worry and waiting, and the quiet knowledge that to lead well is to carry solitude as carefully as one carries a nation. We've already explored the silence that often hides behind the throne. But now, let's take a closer look at something else that stands just as close, something quieter, colder, and just as powerful. It's not always cruelty, and not always ambition. Sometimes, it's something even simpler. Sometimes, it's fear. Fear of losing everything that was built. Fear of betrayal, even by those closest. Fear of disappointing those who believed in them. And sometimes, fear is not only something the ruler feels, it becomes something they learn to use. Throughout history, fear has helped many leaders maintain control. It kept armies obedient and stopped rebellions before they even began. Fear could quiet an entire room with a glance. And for a long time, this method worked. But fear has no loyalty. It doesn't love. It doesn't forgive. It only stays as long as it is needed, and then turns on the one who used it. Catherine the Great, like many before her, faced uprisings. She crushed them not from hatred, but out of a belief that it was necessary. Yet deep inside, she also feared ending up like her husband, overthrown and forgotten. Ashoka began his rule with blood and conquest. His war against Kalinga was meant to prove his power, but what it left behind was not strength. It was sorrow. It taught him what fear truly creates: emptiness, grief, and ashes. Alexander the Great was loved and admired, but fear still followed him. As his ambition grew, so did his distrust. He began punishing even close allies, not because they betrayed him, but because he feared they might. Napoleon understood fear as a political tool. He used it to control entire nations without firing a single shot. But over time, the fear turned inward. He became suspicious of voices around him, arrested critics, and watched his own empire through a lens of doubt. Even Salome, who ruled not through armies, but through art, lived in a world shaped by fear. Not fear of soldiers or war, but fear of missteps, of shame, of disappearing in silence. Fear, in all its forms, can sharpen the mind. It can create discipline, but it can also isolate. It can twist judgment. It can turn leaders into strangers to their own people. Some rulers learned to balance it, to act with strength, but not cruelty. Others let fear consume them. And history remembers both. There are those who ruled with fear and were feared in return. And there are those who met fear and rose above it. Because while fear may bring results, it cannot last. It demands too much. And in the end, it leaves a single question behind. Do people follow you because they believe in you, or because they are too afraid to walk away? That question, more than titles, more than victories, is what shapes how we remember a ruler's name and what we feel when we whisper it in the dark. We've walked through shadows. Now, let us stand in the light, because not all power is feared. Some power is admired, longed for, even loved. Not because it was perfect, but because it gave people something they needed, a symbol, a dream, a figure to believe in. From afar, let's explore the quiet ways that love can follow a ruler, even long after they're gone. How people loved their rulers, not blindly, but deeply. To love a ruler is not the same as loving a person. It is often not based on closeness, not built on shared moments, but on stories, on symbols, on hope. Still, through the centuries, many have looked at their monarchs, their emperors, their queens, and felt something tender, even if they never met them. Why? Because a great ruler, when seen from a distance, can feel like safety, like strength made human, like a parent to a people, a steady voice in a chaotic world. Catherine the Great inspired awe. She led with intellect and clarity. To many in Russia, she felt like the mind of the nation, reason in a time of unrest. She wrote, she built, she made the empire feel awake, and for that she was loved, not with flowers, but with trust. Ashoka, after his transformation, became a figure of peace. His edicts, carved in stone, spoke not of conquest, but of kindness, of animals to protect, of faiths to respect. People saw in him a ruler who had changed, and they loved not the emperor, but the soul he became. Alexander's soldiers followed him farther than most ever would, even when exhausted, even when unsure, because he made them feel they were part of something vast. They cheered him not just as king, but as vision, as the boy who dared to reach the edge of the world. Salome Ando, quiet and unseen, was beloved for her grace. Her poems captured hearts without demanding them, and those who read her felt understood, without ever hearing her voice. Napoleon was loved by many even after exile. His charisma, his vision, his drive to rebuild France out of revolution and fire made him feel like a protector to those who feared chaos more than control. But this kind of love was not always safe. It could turn. It could fade. It could be betrayed by the ruler themselves. Still, when it was real, it mattered. Because love, even from afar, is a bond, a quiet thread between hearts and thrones. And in the end, it leaves a mark on songs, on paintings, on coins and cathedrals, and most of all, in memory. Not every ruler is loved, and no ruler is loved by all. But those who are, they remind us that power does not have to crush. It can also carry, lift, hold, even from a distance, even through time, even now. They are no longer here. The voices that once filled great halls have faded. The armies have returned to silence. The places they ruled are now quiet. Some turned into museums, others reclaimed by time. And yet, they are not forgotten. We still say their names. We still tell their stories. We still wonder what they felt, standing at the edge of history. Now, let us gently explore what remains after the power is gone, after the celebrations have ended, after the titles no longer matter. Why do we still remember them after so many centuries? What is it they left behind? Because every ruler eventually steps away. Every crown is passed on, and every empire fades little by little. But some names stay with us. Why is that? Legacy is not made of stone or gold. It isn't about how grand the palace was or how tall the statue stands. Legacy is something quieter, something that lives in thought and memory. It lives in the ideas that still move us, in the systems that continue to shape us, in the questions we still ask, even now. Catherine the Great is no longer alive, but the schools she helped create, the minds she supported, the reforms she imagined, they still move forward. She lives on in the conversations we have about leadership and learning. Ashoka the Great left behind no throne we can visit, but the words he carved into stone remain even now. They stand outdoors under the sky, and they speak softly about peace, tolerance, and kindness. His name is remembered as a turning point, not in conquest, but in compassion. Alexander's empire did not last. It began to fall apart not long after he was gone. But his story lives. The cities he founded still exist. His journey inspired poems, stories, and songs, not because of how long he ruled, but because of how far he dared to go. He became a legend, and legends, once told, are rarely lost. Salome Ando's writings may be faded now, written in fragile ink long ago, but her spirit is present in every quiet voice that chooses to speak through art, in every person who believes that softness can carry strength, that quiet can hold truth. Napoleon is gone, but the legal structures he shaped are still alive. His influence echoes in the laws and systems of many countries. His name is still debated, questioned, admired, because the questions he raised still matter. Legacy is not about being perfect. It is about what you set in motion. What did they begin? What did they interrupt? What did they dare to try? Sometimes we remember them not for what they built, but because they tried to build something greater than themselves. Because they thought not only about today, but about tomorrow. And real legacy cannot be owned. Once someone is gone, their memory belongs to those who carry it, to those who whisper their names, to the way they made others feel, to the ideas they left behind. That is the quiet form of immortality. Not to live forever, but to keep living. In thought, in kindness, in the slow and gentle way the world still moves because of something they once began. We speak their names, we read their stories, we build statues in their honor, or tear them down in protest. But who were they, really? How much of what we know is true, and how much is myth, polished by time, reshaped by power, or softened by longing? Let us now step into the space between what was and what we believe, what history gets wrong and right about their names. History is not memory. It is construction. It is built by scribes, by victors, by silence. What we know about rulers often depends on who wrote their story, and every story has shadows. Catherine the Great is remembered as an enlightened empress, and she was. But she was also a woman under constant threat, criticized for being foreign, whispered about in cruel rumors. Some legends about her are pure fiction, born not from fact, but from fear of a powerful woman. Ashoka is revered as a saintly figure, a ruler who turned from violence to peace. but the early part of his reign was brutal, and the turn toward Buddhism, while real, also served to unite his fractured empire under a moral system. His story was told by monks, not generals, and truth lives somewhere in between. Alexander is a name drenched in myth. Stories say he was descended from gods, that he tamed a wild horse at age 12, that he wept when there were no more worlds to conquer. Were those tears real? Did he even say the words? Or did we invent them because we needed him to feel tragic? Salome is remembered through fragments. So little survives. Her name may not even be her true name. Her poems could be attributed wrongly. Her life, quiet, undocumented, has become a canvas for what we want grace to look like. And Napoleon, a man praised as a reformer and condemned as a tyrant. Some call him a visionary, others a warmonger. Which is true? Perhaps both. Perhaps neither. Perhaps something else entirely, hidden beneath centuries of retelling. Because time does not only erode facts, it edits, it curates, it forgets. Sometimes rulers rewrite themselves while still alive. Sometimes others do it for them after they're gone. A flattering portrait, a burned pile of letters, a pause in an official record. And so, the question becomes, what do we believe? And why? Myth is not always a lie. Sometimes it's a mirror. It reflects what people needed to see. A symbol of courage. A warning about pride. A story that made sense when the truth was too messy. But if we listen carefully, not to the voice of legend, but to the spaces around it, we begin to feel something more honest, something human. Not the saint, not the villain, but the person, the ruler who was once a child, the conqueror who was once uncertain, the empress who once lay awake at night, wondering what tomorrow would bring. Myth elevates, truth grounds, and in between them there is something tender. Remembrance. To remember, not perfectly, but fully. Not just what they did, but who they might have been. Not to worship, not to condemn, but simply to see. We've seen thrones rise and fall. We've walked through stories shaped by fear, silence, love, and legend. But there's still one more question that remains at the heart of every ruler's life. What does power do to the person who holds it? Because power is not only a tool, It is a mirror. It reflects the truth we carry and reveals the parts of ourselves we can no longer hide. It is also a weight, a daily challenge that slowly reshapes the one who bears it. Let us now explore how leadership changes the human being behind the title. How the role of ruling can sometimes shape and even deepen the person within. No one takes on great power and stays the same. It shifts the rhythm of their life. It changes how others look at them and what people dare to say or refuse to say in their presence. And so, step by step, power begins to work inward. For some, it builds walls. They become cautious, guarded, unsure of who to trust. Their world grows more narrow, even as their empire grows wide. But for others, power becomes something else. Not just a burden, but an invitation, a moment of clarity, a path toward becoming not just a ruler, but a wiser version of themselves. Catherine the Great arrived in Russia as a stranger. She could have remained quiet, ornamental, easy to overlook. But the weight of leadership awakened something inside her. She studied, reflected, decided, and grew. She became empress not simply by title, but by thought and will. Ashoka began with strength, ambition, and conquest. He led with force, determined to leave his mark. But over time, he began to listen. He saw the cost of rule, not just in outcomes, but in impact. And that reflection led him toward peace. He chose a new direction, and power became a way to protect rather than to harm. Alexander changed too. From the driven son of a king, he became a man seeking greatness at all costs. He believed deeply in his mission, but the path overwhelmed him. His reach became so vast that he lost sight of rest, of stillness, of balance. And yet, his transformation was real. A human reaching for something infinite. Napoleon began as a builder. He believed in structure, in vision, in progress. But as power grew around him, his steps changed. He once studied order and later shaped it around himself. His belief in clarity slowly turned inward, and the man who once walked beside revolution became its center. And Salome she never ruled through armies or commands, but she too transformed. At court, she entered as a girl taught to observe. But over time, she became a quiet presence of influence. She used poetry like a compass, and grace as her voice. She guided not with force, but with understanding. Each of them changed, not because they wished to, but because power asks for change. It tests you, it reveals you, and it shapes what you carry into the world. Some became more careful, some became more clear, some opened, some closed. But in each one of their stories, we find the same truth. To lead others is to meet yourself again and again. And if that journey is met with honesty, with care, and with heart, then the growth inside the ruler can become their greatest offering. Because a ruler may shape laws, they may shape armies, but if they shape themselves in the process, if they grow more human, not less, then their story becomes more than history. It becomes a gift. We've come a long way, across time and across stories, through wars and silence, through power and reflection. But before we close our eyes tonight, let's return to something more personal. Let's turn from the rulers of history to ourselves. Because their stories are not only about the past, they continue here, now, in the way we think, in the way we lead our lives, in the way we search for meaning. There is a reason you listened to their journeys, not because of crowns or empires, but because something inside you recognized them, not their titles, but their humanity. Moments of doubt, the desire to be better, the quiet balance between fear and courage, the small voice that asks, "Am I doing the right thing?" That same feeling has lived in you too. Catherine was brilliant and burdened. Ashoka felt guilt and searched for peace. Alexander moved forward without rest. Salome chose silence as strength. Napoleon rose high and struggled to hold it all. They lived in palaces. You may live in a quiet room. They gave commands. You carry your own thoughts, but the emotions, the questions, the choices, they are not so different. Leadership does not only belong to rulers, it lives in how we treat others, in how we speak with kindness, in how we keep going, especially when things are hard. True greatness is not measured in victories or armies. It's found in the way we learn, the way we grow, the way we return to our values again and again. You may never wear a crown, but you still carry the weight of your decisions. You may not lead a nation, but you still shape the world with your patience, your honesty, your care for those around you. These stories were never meant to separate us. They were meant to remind us of what we share, of what is possible. So maybe, when we look at a statue or open a history book, we are not only looking backward, we are remembering what lives inside us, the ability to change, to lead with heart, to rise with courage. That quiet strength, the one that guided them, can guide you too. It does not need applause. It does not need a crown. Only a moment of stillness and a whisper. You can too. Thank you for walking with me through history, through humanity, through yourself. You've heard names tonight that lived centuries ago. You've followed footsteps that crossed deserts, palaces, poetry, silence. And now, the world is quiet again. But you are not empty. You are full of stories, questions, and a kind of peace that comes not from knowing everything, but from feeling something real. We spoke of rulers, but really, we spoke of being human, of change, of burden, of grace, of courage that wears many faces. We do not remember these people because they were perfect. We remember them because they tried, because they dreamed, because they failed and rose and reached again. And maybe, so do you. Maybe you don't need to lead a nation to leave something behind. Maybe all it takes is a kind word, a deep breath, a better choice when no one is watching. That too is legacy. That too is history. And now you can rest. Let your thoughts soften. Let your body slow. You have walked with emperors. You have listened to poems in candlelight. You have stood in silence where kings once fell. And now you can close your eyes and carry none of it. Only warmth, only wonder. Thank you for being here. Thank you for letting these voices touch yours. May your sleep be deep. May your dreams be kind. And may you wake a little more curious than the day before. Good night, dear listener. You are not alone.